Breaking right now on Morning News Now, celebration and hope across the Middle East as Israel and Hamas agreed to the first phase of a plan to end the war in Gaza. President Trump receiving the news from Secretary of State Marco Rubio during a meeting with reporters and later speaking by phone to the families of Israeli hostages still in captivity.
So the hostages will come back. They're all coming back on Monday.
That call just a day after the families of hostages marked 2 years since the October 7th attacks. Now the president saying he may visit the Middle East this weekend as the deal is finalized.
Our final negotiation, as you know, is with Hamas, and it seems to be going well. Peace for the Middle East, it's a beautiful phrase, and we hope it's going to come true.
In Tel Aviv's Hostage Square, cautious optimism that the conflict could be coming to an end.
It's such a good feeling, and I really hope it will happen. I mean, until it will not happen, it will not happen, but we are very excited.
All this as the war rages on in Gaza, with Palestinian officials reporting dozens of people killed or injured in just the past 24 hours. Good morning. Thank you for starting your day with us. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. We have a lot to get to this morning. In a moment, we'll chat about what this all means for the future of the Middle East with the host of Oh My World, Hagar Shamali. First, though, let's get to NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley for more on this agreement and the reaction. Matt, good morning. First, what are the key components of this first phase of the deal, and what has been the reaction from Palestinians and also the hostage families?
Well, what we're hearing now in Hostage Square, what's been christened Hostage Square for the past 2 years by Israelis, is an absolutely ecstatic atmosphere. You're seeing people dancing. You're seeing people dancing the hora, holding Israeli flags and American flags. There's an enormous amount of gratitude here for President Donald Trump, who's seen as the main shepherd for this deal. Now, this deal, you were asking, what are the components? Well, it's just the first phase, and it doesn't by any means cover the whole scope of Trump's 20-point plan. But this is consistent from what I've been hearing from people in leadership here in Israel with some of the past major breakthroughs in Middle East peace deals. The big, shiny parts come first, and the thorny, difficult negotiations are. Some of these deals don't often end up satisfying all of the parties. Even when straight out of the gate, you're still going to be seeing a lot of optimism like this. But what we've heard from both the Palestinians and from the Israelis is that this means that all of the hostages, alive and dead, will be released, probably shortly after the cabinet, which is set to approve this deal later on this evening. After that, we're going to start seeing aid flooding into the Gaza Strip. That's my understanding from people who are in the halls of power here in Israel. But other questions, whether or not Hamas will completely disarm, whether or not Hamas or even the Palestinian Authority, recognized worldwide as the voice of the Palestinian people, will have some sort of role in governance of Gaza going forward, all of that has yet to be even discussed in any serious way. But that doesn't bother folks here. This is a time for celebration. And even though there's a lot still to be done, there's a lot of celebrating to do. Guys.
Matt, also in his post to Truth Social announcing this agreement yesterday, President Trump also said that Israel will, quote, withdraw their troops to an agreed upon line. I mean, that seems clearly to indicate that they will still have a military presence in the enclave. And overnight, the Israeli military instructed all of its forces to prepare strong defenses, we've learned. Has there been any type of pause in fighting since this agreement was announced? And what do we know about what those words from the president mean?
That's hard to say. I mean, it looks as though there has been some slowing of the fighting, according to the Israelis. But according to Palestinian health officials, dozens more people have been killed in just the past 24 hours, including strikes as recently as this morning after all this news came out. And this is, again, consistent with Benjamin Netanyahu's constant refrain that he will engage in what he calls negotiations under fire. The fighting won't stop just because the diplomats are talking, and that's exactly what we're seeing now. In the past, Israel has launched major bloody offensives right even after agreements have been signed and before they come into place, trying to jockey for favorable positions on the battlefield and finish up what they haven't finished before they're obliged to silence their weapons. So we can expect that the fighting will continue up until the very moment when the hostages are released. Guys.
Matt, moments ago, we heard the president tell the families of those hostages Monday. That's the day he expects to see those hostages released. What's the latest? Do we believe that's the case? Tell us what's going to be happening here in the next few days.
Joe, I wish I had the answers to your questions. They are very good questions, and they're the ones that are on everybody's mind here. When is this going to happen? What's the timeline like? I've been speaking with people who would know, and they don't, because all of this is still a question. It's still a matter of negotiations. It all is going to depend on what happens in the next, really, 48 hours. Whether or not we see, I mean, it looks as though the cabinet is almost certainly going to vote here in Israel to approve Trump's 20-point plan, but there are all sorts of things that could get in the way. President Trump is going to be coming to the Middle East, or so he says he wants to. We're hearing that Steve Witkoff might be coming here as early as this evening to Israel to celebrate this victory. But again, the actual timeline of events, when and where all of this will happen, is unclear. In the past, these hostages have been released under cover of night. I've been told that both parties are hoping to avoid the kind of showmanship and the kind of what the Israelis called very gruesome spectacles of public ceremonies releasing these hostages. That was something that the Israelis took grave exception to when they happened earlier this year. So it looks as though this is still going to be a very, very fast process, but one that hasn't yet been determined.
All right, Matt Bradley on the ground in Tel Aviv. Matt, thank you.
For more on this, let's bring in the host of Oh My World on YouTube, Hagar Shamali. She's also the former spokesperson to the U.S. mission to the UN and the former NSC director for Syria and Lebanon. Hagar, good morning. Great to have you with us. First, we'd just love to know your initial thoughts when you heard a deal was reached.
I was so excited. This is a real reason to be overjoyed and have relief and rejoice and really pray for those who are suffering and have suffered. And I've also spoken to many hostage families. I've interviewed many hostage parents. I'm especially excited for them. It's a real moment. And this is a real win for a lot of the parties, including President Trump.
Hagar, as we just heard there, Israel has not yet stopped fighting in Gaza. What do you think that tells us about the tensions that still exist in the region? Is that a sign of how fragile or how durable peace will ever be as a possibility there?
Sure, these things are always extremely fragile, and they could upend at any moment. And so that's why I'm praying for Monday, basically, to get to Monday. But that said, it is not uncommon in wars around the world for sides to continue fighting until there's some kind of final agreement. So while you always want, and President Trump has said, he placed pressure on Israel. He asked Netanyahu, even before they got to this agreement throughout this week when they were in talks in Egypt, and said, please stop the strikes, because it's a measure of good faith, right? And it makes it easier if there's no activity, no aggression or kinetic activity whatsoever. It is not how it typically goes, though. You can look at Russia and Ukraine as an example of that. Anytime they've come close to any kind of deal, or anytime there are talks that go on, the fighting always continues until there's this ultimate final deal. And I wish it weren't like that, but that's not uncommon in war.
We've been talking a lot, Hagar, also with you, about kind of if either side achieved stated goals in the 2 years in this war. And this deal does still leave some things unclear, specifically about the disbanding of Hamas, a goal Israel has repeatedly stated since the war began. We know we're only at the start of this phase one of this plan, but what are the big remaining questions you have as this process unfolds? What happens to that goal?
Sure. So the number one actually is really the disarmament of Hamas. So we know that from the initial statement that Hamas put out earlier this week, that they accepted this, they said, yes, but, and as you mentioned, you and I talked about this, but the fact is that question of disarmament is a really big one, right? They need to surrender and they need to lay down their arms. Now, they could actually pretend to accept that and say, okay, you know what, sure, fine, we accept it. And then they're going to try to find ways to continue arming themselves. That would not at all surprise me. That might not necessarily mean that the whole thing unravels, though. What it could mean, for example, is what you see in Lebanon. The Israelis and Lebanese have a ceasefire. Again, it is different because you're dealing with a state actor and the Lebanese government was the partner to that. But when Hezbollah breaks that ceasefire, when they are seen attempting to move weapons in the south, Israel strikes it. But that's all they strike. And so you might see something like that. It could continue a ceasefire with targeted strikes where the ceasefire still technically holds.
All right, Hagar, thank you as always for joining us on this important morning.
In other news, the Trump administration is stepping up efforts to send National Guard troops to Democratic-led cities despite strong resistance from state officials.
Overnight, 500 National Guard troops from both Texas and Illinois arrived in Chicago. The White House says they are there to protect ICE personnel amid ongoing protests over that crackdown on immigration.
NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez joins us now from Washington. Gabe, good morning. So the arrival of these troops comes despite all the legal challenges we're seeing to their presence. What is the mission for these troops right now? Do we know how long they're supposed to be in Chicago?
Well, Joe and Savannah, good morning. The Trump administration says the mission is to protect ICE, to protect federal agents and also federal property, federal buildings. And today there are set to be two crucial court hearings to decide whether the troop deployments to Chicago and to Portland, Oregon should be stopped. But as you mentioned, there are about 200 Texas National Guard troops that are being deployed at the moment to Chicago, some 300 from the Illinois National Guard. And last night, there were protests in the city of Chicago as these troop deployments got underway, Joe and Savannah.
Gabe, this has all sparked this massive war of words between President Trump and Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker that escalated again yesterday after the president said Pritzker should be in jail for failing to protect these ICE officers. What's the president referring to here, and how is Pritzker responding?
Yeah, certainly that war of words is ramping up. And the president is apparently referencing this incident where an SUV rammed a vehicle full of ICE agents. Now, Chicago police deny that they were told to stand down in any way, but the president is referring to that incident. You see video of it there. And he posted yesterday that both the mayor of Chicago and the governor of Illinois should be in jail for this. I was in the room yesterday with the president during an event, and I asked him whether he had asked the DOJ to look into charges for both the mayor and the governor. Listen to what he said.
I've seen the law, and when you have a group of people where the police call off the safety for ICE officials, I've understood that, and I've read it today in numerous journals, that that's illegal.
He's a coward. He says a lot of things to the camera. He likes to pretend to be a tough guy. Come and get me. What kind of a country are we living in where the president of the United States is targeting his political opponents? He's demented, literally, unhinged.
The governor calling the president a coward there. Mayor Brandon Johnson referring to all of this as authoritarianism, Joe and Savannah.
And Gabe, amid all this, NBC News understands the Trump administration is seriously considering invoking the Insurrection Act. This is something we've been talking about all week. Explain to us what that would actually mean and what else we're learning from our sources.
Well, Joe, that could mean the deployment of active duty troops. And yes, as we've been reporting, White House officials, including the president, have been using that phrase insurrection more and more, especially White House Deputy Chief of Staff Stephen Miller. But as you mentioned, according to 5 people familiar with the talks, White House officials in recent days have been seriously considering the president invoking the Insurrection Act, although no decision is imminent, according to the sources. Joe.
All right. Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, thank you.
Gabe, what a sunrise going on behind you. Well, right there as that gorgeous fall day starts in D.C., the government still shut down. It's day 9, and there is still no end in sight. Yesterday, a vote to reopen the government failed again in the Senate. That was for the 6th time. Democrats want to negotiate health care funding, but Republicans want leaders to approve a short-term spending plan first.
Comes as the IRS furloughed more than 30,000 workers yesterday, which brought many of the agency's operations to a grinding halt. Despite delays, that October 15th deadline for Americans who got extensions on their 2024 taxes, well, that will still apply.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona joins us now with the very latest. Mel, good morning. So nearly half of the IRS workforce is currently on this temporary unpaid leave. How does that ultimately impact taxpayers?
Yeah, good morning, guys. This is a huge chunk of the IRS workforce, 46%. And the agency says now it's going to halt most administrative services, and it's also going to put a pause on many taxpayer services. So what Americans can expect is longer wait times, delays and changes to the tax code. The IRS will not be picking up the phone, and we are going to see some backlogs. Now, as you mentioned, one thing that's not impacted is the tax filing deadline of October 15th if anyone deferred their taxes and got an extension. But no doubt, this is just the latest example of how the government shutdown is really impacting Americans all across the country, not just here in D.C.
And Mel, those tensions between Democrat and GOP lawmakers heating up on the Capitol Hill, literally in the halls of the Capitol. We saw two senators from Arizona very clearly clash with House Speaker Mike Johnson outside of his office yesterday. Let's listen to some of that exchange, and we'll talk on the other side.
You don't want to be on Epstein discharge. How much?
It's totally absurd. You guys are experts at red herrings and distraction. No, there's nothing to do with Epstein. Guys, we got to get the government open and turn the lights on so we can get everybody back here and get the regular session.
Stop covering up for the pedophiles.
There's not. That's ridiculous.
Nobody's covering up for pedophiles. So knock it the hell off.
Over questions about why a newly elected Democratic congresswoman from Arizona in the House had not been sworn in yet. In an atmosphere like this, where do things stand with Congress right now after another failed attempt to try and pass the funding bill?
Yeah, it feels a little bit like Groundhog's Day on Capitol Hill. The Senate is going to vote once again today on that GOP stopgap spending bill. Now for a seventh time, it is expected to fail, and it's been the same three Senate Democrats voting for that bill, which is not enough to get it over the finish line. And meanwhile, the House isn't even here. And as you saw, the members who are here are getting into these really heated confrontations in the hallway. It wasn't just the one you played. There was a separate confrontation involving Republican Congressman Mike Lawler from New York confronting Hakeem Jeffries, the House Minority Leader, also from New York. So tensions are just really high right now, and it's not clear what the off-ramp is. But I will say there have been some cracks starting to emerge, at least on the Republican side. Johnson is facing pressure to start bringing members back. They're facing pressure to put some bills on the floor to try to show that they're doing something. But there just isn't a deal right now to end the government shutdown.
So, Mel, there's sort of this like cascade effect, and it's like different pieces of the government, different workers are going to really feel this at different times. The next big pressure point here in this battle, October 15th, that's the day that active duty military members are going to miss out on their first paycheck. I understand there's been some talk about a separate standalone bill as some of these, it's almost like just plugging holes, it seems at this point. What do we know about that?
Yeah, that is one of those areas that I mentioned that Johnson is actually facing a lot of pressure. He's getting some of his own members, particularly some Republicans in swing districts, calling on them to bring the House back so that they can pass a bill to give pay to the troops. Initially, Johnson and John Thune, the Senate leader, seemed open to that idea, but then Johnson ruled it out yesterday. Part of the calculation for Republican leaders is that they want to be able to make the argument that the only solution is to just reopen the government in its entirety. There's also some concern about once you start picking and choosing and exempting certain groups, why don't you do the same for others? So it is a little bit more complicated than it might seem. But President Trump came out yesterday and said he wants to pay the troops, so that could perhaps put some pressure on the leadership to act in the House. But as far as the government shutdown, that just does not seem to be ending anytime soon.
All right, Mel, thank you very much.
For many Democratic lawmakers and one notable Republican, the potential explosion of health care costs is the primary issue in this shutdown battle. Experts estimate that premiums for some families could jump by more than $3,000 a year if Congress lets subsidies expire for the Affordable Care Act before the end of the year. Democrats want a deal to extend them before voting to reopen the government. Well, now even Trump loyalist Marjorie Taylor Greene is pushing for action. NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans explains.
My own family suffers from this situation, my friends and my neighbors.
For Georgia Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene, the conflict behind the government shutdown is personal. Typically a MAGA loyalist, she's broken with the GOP over concerns that her children's health care premiums will double next year.
2 out of the 3 have aged out of being on my insurance. And so you're seeing me being a mom who's frankly really pissed off at a lot of the failures that I think come from decades of both parties.
She's getting at the core point Democrats have been making. ACA marketplace subsidies expire at the end of the year. Democrats want to negotiate extensions before they'll vote to reopen the government. As many as 22 million Americans could see their premiums spike by an average 114% without an extension of the subsidies put in place during the Biden administration.
If they expire at the end of the year, what happens to your health insurance premiums? They will double, it looks like.
Leanne Safford and her husband now pay $278 a month for their health care premiums through the Affordable Care Act marketplace. Their plight, common. According to one analysis, for an individual making $35,000 a year, the annual premium would jump by more than $1,500. A family of four making $75,000, their increase would be more than $3,300.
What kind of ripple effect is that going to have in your life?
We would need to budget for those changes. We would need to scale back. Our child is 13, so we may need to reassess when braces might be happening.
For Leanne and millions of others, sticker shock is now setting in as notices come out this month outlining what next year's premiums will be. Christine Romans, NBC News, New York.
Well, more than 4 months after a brazen jailbreak from a New Orleans jail, the last inmate who was still on the run is now back in custody. Authorities say Derek Groves was captured in Atlanta after a standoff with police. A SWAT team reportedly spent hours searching a house for Groves before finding him in a crawl space beneath the home. He was one of 10 inmates. I'm sure you remember this. They broke out of the Orleans Justice Center in May by removing a toilet and crawling through a hole in the wall. Investigators say since that escape, more than a dozen people, including a jail maintenance worker and Groves' girlfriend, have been arrested for helping with the plan.
On Wednesday, authorities announced the arrest of a man who's accused of starting the deadly Palisades fire in Los Angeles earlier this year. It was one of the most destructive fires in California history. 12 people were killed and thousands of structures were destroyed. Well, now police have arrested a 29-year-old man in Florida. He's charged with arson and accused of maliciously starting the fire. We get the latest from NBC News correspondent Liz Kreutz.
9 months and 1 day since the start of the Palisades fire, federal authorities arresting 29-year-old Jonathan Rendernecht, charging him with arson for allegedly setting the deadly blaze.
We will prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he intentionally started this fire. And maliciously.
After what officials describe as a painstaking months-long investigation, authorities now determining the Palisades fire stemmed from the Lockman fire, which they say Rendernecht started during the early hours of New Year's Day.
And it smoldered underground for about a week until on January 7th, heavy winds caused this underground fire to surface and spread above ground, causing what became known as the Palisades fire.
According to the criminal complaint, Rendernecht was driving for Uber on New Year's Eve. His last two passengers allegedly described him as appearing agitated and angry. After his last ride ended at 11:34 p.m. in the Pacific Palisades, authorities say he then drove alone to the nearby Skull Rock trailhead and hiked up the trail. About 30 minutes later, right around here is where investigators say the fire started, likely from a lighter. They say Rendernecht then tried calling 911 multiple times but couldn't get through, possibly because of cell signal. Investigators not yet revealing an alleged motive, but pointing to these chilling AI images he asked ChatGPT to create.
The defendant's ChatGPT prompt of a dystopian painting showing in part a burning forest and a crowd fleeing from it.
Fire victims reacting outraged.
It is mind-boggling to think that somebody would actually think about burning down a city.
I want him to know that, how much people are suffering, how much suffering he caused.
Our thanks to Liz Kreutz for that report. The Palisades fire was just one of 6 major fires that tore through Southern California back in January. In all, nearly 7,000 structures were destroyed by the fire, most of them homes. Rendernecht is set to appear for a detention hearing in Florida later today.
Let's turn now to weather. There is a strong nor'easter approaching for many of us here on the East Coast.
Meteorologist Amelia Draper has your morning news now forecast. Amelia, good morning.
Good morning, Joe and Savannah. Yeah, not ideal conditions this weekend along the eastern seaboard. So here's a look at future weather on Saturday. Rain becomes heavy as this storm forms near the Carolinas and winds begin to pick up along the southeast coast. Then we head on into Sunday and this storm slowly advances toward the north, sending rain, some moderate to heavy rain into the mid-Atlantic with strong onshore winds. This could also lead to some coastal flooding, and we continue to track showers on Monday for Indigenous Peoples Day. We'll see this rain continuing to impact areas like New York and Nantucket on Monday with cool and breezy conditions from Virginia to Maine. When we look at the wind gusts from the storm, winds gusting along the coast up to 50, even 60 miles an hour in locations from Virginia Beach to Ocean City, Maryland, even up through Montauk and Nantucket as well. The good news, is there is any, is some needed rain from this storm system falling. We're talking about locally 3 to 5 inches in areas like Cape Hatteras, Norfolk, Ocean City and Atlantic City, all the way into Washington, D.C. and Richmond. The United States Drought Monitor has many of these locations anywhere from abnormally dry into a moderate drought. Then we head out to the southeast, where we're tracking a significant threat for some flooding there. This includes areas like Phoenix, Flagstaff, and Durango. You can see projected rainfall totals here anywhere from about 1 to 3 inches as we track Tropical Storm Priscilla. Right now, this storm is located 270 miles west of the southern tip of Baja California. Maximum winds currently coming in at 50 miles an hour as it moves towards the northwest at about 8 miles an hour. So here's the latest track with this over the next few days. Tropical moisture will enhance rainfall in the southeast. That's going to lead to an elevated flood risk from many storms falling in areas like Tucson and Albuquerque as well. And then as we continue to track the storm with future weather, we have flood alerts. These flood alerts are in effect for 6 million people with many locations under a flood watch. This includes areas like Cedar City down to Phoenix out towards the Yuma area. Meanwhile, we're also tracking some really cool temperatures in the mid-Atlantic and the Northeast. This morning, we have a fall chill that's persisting through Friday. With temperatures only around 66 for a high in areas like Washington, D.C. Meanwhile, in the middle part of the country, it's a great day out there tomorrow. And then we're talking about that tropical rain again in the southeast with flooding likely on Saturday. Savannah and Joe.
All right, Amelia, thank you so much.
We thank you for watching. And remember, stay updated on breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or watch live on our YouTube channel.